Good morning. Zimbabwe is back at the global geopolitical play. Whilst we're busy worried about Idi Mnangagwa and Chiwenga's in infighting within ZANU-PF, there's a bigger game being played on a global scale, and Zimbabwe is part of it. As we all know by now that the United States is making bold moves against a very ambitious China, a China that is the global manufacturing hub and largely controls most of the supply chains range from South America to Africa and even to South Asia, which gives them this ability to maintain the monopoly in manufacturing. That monopoly in manufacturing and an increasing GDP that is close to surpassing the US GDP gives China a tremendous power together with Russia and Iran. So much power that they can use to leverage politically against Washington. And that has sent shockwaves across Washington. And therefore, Washington has made bold moves ever since the 2016 elections of Donald Trump, when Donald Trump declared a trade war against China. We saw Trump imposing tariffs on Chinese manufactured goods, an indication that the United States is done with globalization and they want to reindustrialize in the United States and also in friendly countries. But here is the catch. For the United States to reindustrialize, whether in USA, Mexico, or friend shoring, they need, therefore, to have control of the global supply chain of raw materials. Zimbabwe, Zambia, DRC, Mozambique, South Africa are some of the countries in our Southern Africa development region that were critical in the supply chain of Chinese industries. And the United States had largely ignored Africa because it was no longer focused on manufacturing, since it was now something that was just done by the Chinese. That is why you will see Chinese investment has increased in Africa and US investments have decreased in Africa because they had allowed China to participate on that side of the economy, as the United States focus largely on the financial sector. They're having a heavily financialized system, but they are beginning to realize that a financialized economy without a robust industrial anchor is not a conducive for the global superpower to maintain the power going forward. Hence, they want to take back that power. We see that policy continued even through the Biden administration. And as we're going to the US elections by the end of this year, I do not see any difference between Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump as far as this kind of trade war is concerned. In fact, Donald Trump might actually be worse than the Republicans and going to be more aggressive. Sorry, Donald Trump is going to be more aggressive than the Democrats. Donald Trump is a Republican, by the way. Sorry about that. So, either way, those supply chains of raw materials, that is, minerals on the ground, and and other materials that are needed as far as manufacturing is concerned, are now going to be uh, on the focus of Washington policymakers and the industrialization agenda, the manufacturing agenda of the United States. I'm saying this to you as a Zimbabwean because I want you to understand that the Look East policy will have these kind of implications going forward, these kind of complications going forward. Look East policy could have been, it was perhaps a good idea in the past 20 years if you were a supplier of raw materials like Zimbabwe. Even South Africa has got a strong Chinese focused political identity because China has been the biggest buyer. But going forward, I do not think that China will be the biggest buyer. The United States and its allies are coming into the fray. Now, not all manufacturing is going to go to the United States because of unfavorable or wages and costs to the manufacturer. So, the other option that Washington has is, instead of using China, is to look for other countries, especially third world countries like Zimbabwe and some other countries within Southern African region that already do have these raw materials, using those countries as basis for global manufacturing and divesting away from China. That is a strategy that I see Washington about to embark on, because in that way you will take away the hegemony of Chinese manufacturing from China, give it to these weaker states who will benefit economically, but they are not an immediate political threat as far as global leadership is concerned. The problem with China is that they flew too close to the sun and became excessively ambitious and want to replace the king on the throne. Therefore, it makes Washington nervous, and we have seen this move that has been happening in the past 8 years in Washington politics, and I do not see any way in which it is moving backwards. Now, China has made alliances with Russia, Iran, and the radical Islamic world that is already anti United States, anti Semitic, anti Jewish. That alliance is a strong alliance as long as it is still a as long as China is still a global manufacturing hub. Russia is important in the mix because it has got a lot of resources that China needs. Also, Iran has got oil, and Iran has got a natural hatred for the Americans and the Jewish people. Therefore, a Chinese proxy war against the United States and the West could easily be achieved through Iran, because Iran, whether China supports Iran or not, Iran just wants Israel dead. So for that reason, Iran is brought into the into the into the fray, and unfortunately, the countries in South America and in Africa who have largely been at the mercy of the Chinese, because as I told you that the Chinese are the buyers since they are the manufacturers. The Americans have deindustrialized in the past 50 years because they they went through a period of globalization, which is a way of moving manufacturing from America to China. So now China has become too big and become too ambitious and now wants to overtake the boss, which actually was part and parcel of the Chinese growth. So that Chinese growth model works only up to this point. Now, the global capital has to move from China and begin to look for places where there is low wage costs, and where there is availability of natural resources to begin manufacturing. And the SADC region now becomes a very critical region to Washington policy makers. So, as Mnangagwa and Chiwenga are battling it out, it does not matter who wins, whether it's Mnangagwa or it's Chiwenga, as long as they are still affiliated with the Chinese and hoping that the Chinese are going to help them. We should be aware that the global atmosphere is shifting. China will not be that important in the next 5, 10, or 20 years. China will go the way of Japan. Chinese economy is about to crash. China's manufacturing success is based largely on government support that is at the expense of the Chinese people. The Chinese success actually, or industrial success, is actually a transfer of wealth from the rest of the Chinese worker to the manufacturers. It is not sustainable, especially at a critical time like this when the Chinese Communist Party is over ambitious and wants to take over United States. They should have just maintained their manufacturing uh, hub and played nice with everybody around the world. But China has decided to be confrontational. We see the Chinese bullying in the South China Sea. We see the Chinese flying balloons into the United States. We see the Chinese aligning themselves with Russia, which is fighting Ukraine, which is a way of Putin fighting the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So we've got China at the far end, Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and the United States. That is the diagram of that proxy war. We see Russia and China supporting Iran. Iran, which is anti-Israel. The reason why they're anti-Israel is because they hate the United States and they do not want the American influence in the Middle East. However, that region is very fractured because Saudi Arabia and some countries in the GCC are moving closer and closer, inching closer to normalizing relations with Israel in the United States. That is why actually the Gulf countries are successful. It is not because of Islam. It is because of their alliance with Washington. All countries around the world that have aligned with Washington have succeeded. And all countries around the world that have aligned themselves with China and Russia have failed. Demagogues and disrespecters of human rights will tend to support Russia and China because there is no accountability in that side of the world. However, the free world has got accountability, respect for human rights, and it's created an environment that allows human progress to happen. So people like Idim Nanga and General Chiwenga, both of them have got no respect for human rights. They do not want to be accountable for anything. They just want to do as they please, and therefore naturally they are attracted to the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians. That is why Iran has got scientists in Zimbabwe, in a country that has got uranium, a key ingredient in the making of a nuclear bomb. Iran sends scientists to that country that is anti-American, anti-British. At a critical time like this, when Israel is at war with Iran, ZANU-PF is putting the lives of the Zimbabweans at risk. We know the tactics of the Iranians and all the proxies of the Iranians. They like to hide behind civilians. So when the Israeli army fights in the Gaza Strip, Hamas hides behind women and children. They place their army bases in hospitals and also in creches. And so when those bombs are bombed, the women and children that are near those bombs die. Then the propaganda machine of the Middle East begins to send out this news that Israel is killing women and children. No, Israel is targeting the military bases of Hamas. It's just that Hamas puts those women and children on the line of fire on purpose, for propaganda purposes. Take a look at how demonic that is. These Islamic radicals hate their own people so much that they will put their own people on the line of fire so that the death of their own people can be used to score political points. That's how demonic this whole thing is. Instead of, if Hamas loved its population in the Gaza Strip, they will be engaged in a warfare away from the civilians. But because Hamas is like ZANU-PF, it does not like civilians. Even the civilians there are oppressed by Hamas. Hamas therefore uses those civilians as a human shield against Israel. So Israel says, we have been patient with you for a long time. Israel has been patient. That is why they put that border in the Gaza Strip and keep the Palestinians safe there. But now the Palestinians were overtaken by this radical group, Hamas, that is sponsored by the Ayatollah of Iran, which is a ZANU-PF of that area. Hamas is another form of ZANU-PF to the Palestinians. Don't be fooled. Hamas is not a savior. Hamas is the bad guy here. Israel is actually freeing the Palestinian people from the evil of Hamas and Iran. But since Hamas and Iran hate the Palestinian women and children anyway, they will put them in the line of fire, so for them to die. And when those women die, not because of Israel, not because of Benjamin Netanyahu, but because of the Iranians, then they say, take a look, people of the world, take a look, people of the world. Israel is killing women and children. These are murderers. Who is a murderer? Tell me. When you see a bomb coming towards you, and then you put a child in to protect yourself so that the child dies, who is the murderer? The one who threw the bomb, or you who is actually using the child as a human shield? And how dare you even go around the world telling the whole world that Israel is killing women and children? When Israel sends food aid in the Gaza Strip, Hamas, just like ZANU-PF, steals that food and sells it for a profit to the people in the Gaza Strip. If those Islamic radicals loved people, they will take that food and give it them for free. But they don't. Hamas closes aid. Hamas hates Palestinians. Iran and the Ayatollah hate Palestinians. You have got to get that right. Otherwise, you will lose the whole plot. The Arab countries that are refusing to take the Palestinian refugees, first of all, starting with Egypt, hate Palestinians. They are using their fellow Muslim brothers because of their hatred for Israel, which is so much that they are willing to sacrifice those Palestinians for cheap political points. If the Islamic world that is led by the Ayatollah actually loved the Palestinians, Egypt and all the countries in the Arab Circle open their borders and say, there is war in the Gaza Strip. Let us take all refugees from the Gaza Strip ASAP. Israel, have your people. Oman, Iraq, Iran, and Tunisia. All of those countries will have a share so that Hamas will face Israel without civilians. But guess what? They all said no. None of the Arab countries want their fellow Muslims. Do you know why? because they are using those fellow Muslims as a weapon against Israel. That is actually the sin of the Arab countries. And the hypocrisy of the Arab countries is using human beings as a weapon. In this case, they're not being used as a shield, but they're actually used as a weapon against Israel. And that needs to be understood for what it is. Because the weapon is for that population to cause trouble in the land of the Israelis. And then when the Israelis fight back, they say, look, people of the world, Israelites is killing Palestinians. It's Palestinian land. So that is what we're dealing with. Same thing that Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon. They are in populated zones. So when Israel attacks them, the people there are caught up in the mix. Same thing with their proxies in Yemen. The Yemenis, ordinary people, are caught up in the crossfire as Iran is using those Houthi rebels against the global shipping that passes through the Red Sea. I will not be surprised if the Iranian scientists who are now friends with Edim Nangab will do something evil and put Zimbabweans' lives at risk. As Vene are busy eating money, they've got no clue that their father is busy putting the lives of the Zimbabweans at risk. As they keep on singing that stupid 2030 song, they do not know in 2030 they might be bombed because their favorite candidate is bringing people that have got a history of using people as human shields. The Iranian issue is a very critical issue in Zimbabwe. If we do not look into it and look aside, we will become the next Gaza Strip. And no one will say you were not told, for you were told and you decided not to listen. So that Zimbabwe-Iranian relationship is a huge risk that I do not believe that our people should carry. I don't even believe even ZANU-PF sympathizers should be supporting Edim Nangagwa because of his relationships and allowing those Iranian scientists to come and develop whatever it is that they're developing in the country for the Ayatollah. The new government should move immediately to cut ties with the Ayatollah and expel those Iranian scientists ASAP. China is good for business. As long as China is buying our resources and they are paying us, good. As long as the Chinese are building their steel manufacturing companies and other mining firms, as long as they are paying their fair share of the taxes and respecting the labor costs and also respecting our environmental laws, we are fine. Their backlash for global manufacturing is between them and the United States. However, as a sovereign country, we also need to maintain our right to develop our manufacturing. Zimbabwean people as a population have been denied the right to development. ZANU-PF and the evil thugs, their evil thuggery friends around the world from China and Russia and Iran, have disallowed the people of Zimbabwe that right to development. The next new Zimbabwe should be focused on making sure that as the nation as a whole gets that right to development, turning our nation into a manufacturing hub for the free world and the rest of the world. Let us not be ideologically bankrupt, ladies and gentlemen. Let us not be caught geopolitically wrong, sleeping with the wrong people, making wrong decisions. I support Israel. Israel has to win the war for the sake of human progress. Emotionally driven people who are easily swayed by the propaganda of the Ayatollah see the death of women and children in the Gaza Strip as a reason to hate Israel. Not understanding that the Ayatollah and Putin have got no good intentions for the rest of us. If they can destroy Israel, then they can destroy Europe and the United States of America. If China, Russia, and Iran destroys the United States, you can kiss human progress goodbye. You are all going to be turned into Muslims. If not, they chop your head off. Women will lose most of their rights. They won't be allowed to drive a car. They won't be allowed to talk to anyone. They won't be allowed to lead anything. You will go back to be what you are, just a woman. Stay at home, cook, wash dishes, never have any ambition. On top of that, don't even go to school. It's for men. And men, militarized, shall be in the military and just learn how to kill. That is a very dark world. The Iranian regime gives us a picture of what a world led by Iranian regime, Russian regime, and the Chinese CCP. If you take a look at the oppression of the Chinese in China, though they've got an economic miracle, but that economic miracle, though it took people out of poverty, it also at the expense of a lot of social ills and a lot of oppression within China. If China is allowed to run the world together with the Ayatollah and the Vladimir Putin, I'm afraid the ideologically bankrupt politicians who support Iran against Israel are going to be the ones who will be living a horrible life, and it will be too late to look back and say, yo, the United States leadership was better than this. China, Russia, and Iran have not developed institutions that foster for human progress. Rather, they've developed extractive institutions, as this favorite book of mine says. This book that just won a Nobel Peace Prize. I've had it for the past few months. It's an amazing book by Daron Acemoglu and James A. Robinson. I recommend it to be read by everybody who is serious about human progress. For humanity to progress, governments have to demonstrate a desire to build institutions, political and economic institutions that work towards driving development and further development. I'm afraid China, Russia, and Iran have developed the opposite of that. Extractive institutions that seek to oppress. That is why you will see that dictators in Africa are aligning themselves with Russia and China, because they too are not interested in developing institutions that foster human progress. Recently, at the cross the Zimbabwean economist, said something interesting in an interview, something that I never knew. He said in South Africa, when the ANC was broke, he told the white South Africans to put money in the ANC, just like the white Zimbabweans put money in ZANU-PF. He said something perhaps he was not intending to say. He said the white South Africans refused. Instead, when ANC was going through financial troubles, it was Iran that came to the rescue. Iran gave the ANC money so that the ANC will not be bankrupt and be able to pay its workers and do its programs, which begins to explain why South Africa is being used by Iran to take Israel to court. It never made sense to me because black South Africans do not care at all about what is happening in the Middle East. Yet the ANC, of all the countries in the world, of all the Arab countries that have got a strong belief in the destruction of Israel, never did anything. But South Africa, a faraway African country, taking Israel to court. It is because Iran, according to Eddie Cross, has been sponsoring the ANC. So it is payback time. The ANC is sleeping with the devil, and it is difficult. Once you take the devil's money, it is difficult to free yourself from it. You will have to be defending that relationship with lies and all sorts of propaganda, and end up putting your people at risk and entering a war that you will not win. I'm afraid Iran's influence in Zimbabwe is going to put our people at risk. It is important for level-minded Zimbabweans in the political space to admit that it is an error. I am not talking about politicking for positions or ZANU-PF versus Triple C, whatever. I'm just being pragmatic. You need to accept that it is an error for Harare to have strong ties with Tehran. A few months ago, the deputy president, Chiwenga, went to Tehran to meet the Iranian government. Those ties, those friendships are friendships of doom, friendships of failure, dangerous territory that will put the whole nation at risk. You might disagree with my politics, but this, what I'm telling you, is got the potential of bringing death to millions of Zimbabweans. Never mind the suffering. How about death? How about bombs? Because we're playing with the wrong people. Iran wants all Jewish people dead. And they will stop at nothing to ensure that their vision, which is sponsored by Lucifer, Satan himself, who hates Jesus Christ. Let me tell you, the reason why Iran hates Israel is not because of them, it's because of the devil. The devil hates Christ. What is hated in Israel, it is the Christ in Israel. So as the devil is fighting Christ, so it's a proxy war. It's a proxy war in the spirit. It's a spiritual war between Satan and Jesus. The devil views Israel as the physical representation of Yahweh, of Christ. And the Islam, through their prophet Muhammad, who really obviously is not a prophet of Yahweh, because if Muhammad was a prophet of Yahweh, he would have known that Israel is the chosen nation of the Lord. But because he is anti the chosen nation of Yahweh, of Jesus Christ, therefore they are being anti-Christ. And the Ayatollah in Iran are the antichrist. The Russia also being part of the antichrist. So we are labeling Russia, Iran, China's involvement in that whole antichrist agenda. Christ is hated by most people in the world because most people in the world are evil, they are sinful. Hence, you see this anti-Israeli movement around the world. Most of the people that are anti-Israel are not even Christians. They do not like Christ. So they are easily overtaken by the lies of Satan. So this is a war against our Lord. Iran cannot use my country to be a base to fight my God. That right there is an abomination that all Christians in Zimbabwe and around the world should rally behind and fight against. We need to fight against Iranian influence in our region. Iran influence will lead to radicalizing our populations for constant wars as they extract resources from us. Those are bad people. Take a look at what Iran is doing in Yemen. The Yemen war, fueled by Iran, will never stop. Iran gives you guns and bombs and it causes human misery because Iran is a demonic regime sponsored by none other than Lucifer himself to fight our Lord Jesus. Do not think that there's going to be a positive outcome for these Harare-Tehran relationships. Take a look at what they've done to the ANC. Now they are forcing the ANC to use its influence in South African government for South Africa as a country to take Jesus Christ to court. What are they planning for Zimbabwe? What is China, Russia, and Iran planning to do with the nation of Zimbabwe as far as that geopolitical warfare is concerned? If you love Zimbabwe, really truly speaking, if you love Zimbabwe, you begin to see right now what I'm talking about. That we may all be destroyed, all because of Vene chanting useless slogans that we have got no clue of their meaning. 2030, 2030. Do you know what it means? It means 2030 you'll be dead. You'll be a Gaza Strip. Because while they are busy looking for enemies of Israel and allowing them to come to the country to do things that must not be done. And you are busy wearing Mazambia and dancing and saying that is the right thing to do. Ignorance. The Bible says, my people perish because of ignorance. We need to be sober-minded, gentlemen, and make decisions that will take our country forward to a place of a blessing, not to a place of a curse. Iti Mnangagwa is a curse to Zimbabwe. So is his deputy general Chiwenga. I don't care what they are fighting. Both of them must go, including the organization that they represent, ZANU-PF, must go. All of it. I pray that you are blessed and you are furnished with wisdom to understand the political dynamics and the path forward that will bring forward a successful and blessed Zimbabwe. Have a blessed day. My name is Nobani Zondo.